Hello, my name is Taylor Blatchford, and today I will be completing my reputational risk assessment presentation on the Miss America organization. I am studying the Miss America organization because not only is it an organization I'm highly familiar with, because I've competed as a contestant, I've worked as a volunteer, and I've even coached people within the organization, but there is a lot that can be learned about some of the changes and recent scenarios the organization has dealt with over the last several years. And I think it would be very valuable to discuss these things within the space of a reputational risk assessment. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this. But before we do, I want to read a quote from the Griffin textbook that I think perfectly encapsulated everything that this assignment stands for, and quite frankly, everything that this entire course stands for. And that quote reads that predicting that something could happen is fairly meaningless unless it is accompanied by an assessment of what it would mean if it did happen. And this is something I feel like I have heard throughout my entire time as a student at this university. We are always talking about risks. We're always talking about how, as public relations professionals, we can do our best to protect organizations and clients from risks. And it's completely impossible to do that if you don't anticipate the future. And 99% of risk management, it feels like, is just doing our best to study what the future might look like and how an organization can handle every situation going forward. And that is extremely, extremely valuable. So before we dive into the actual reputational risk assessment, I think there are some important facts that are valuable to the rest of the presentation, just in terms of understanding the Miss America organization and where this entire conversation is coming from. So the first important fact that is important to recognize is just the Miss America organization's history. The Miss America organization has existed since 1921, and to this day, it is the largest provider of scholarships for women in the world, which is something the organization is very proud of. The swimsuit competition is what the pageant began as. There were not other phases of competition at the beginning, it was just swimsuit. And so that began in 1921 and then it ended in 2018. Other portions of the competition included evening gown, talent, onstage question, and private interview. The competition as it stands today is in place with the portions of competition of private interview, social impact initiative pitch, evening gown, and onstage question. Note that swimsuit no longer exists. The organization has received a lot of backlash for getting rid of the swimsuit competition and therefore making too many quick changes to the framework of the program. Now to start with step one, which is the introduction. I think we should start by breaking this down. First, I want to address what this assessment is for. The assessment of the Miss America organization will be analyzing not only the aftermath of getting rid of the swimsuit portion of the competition, but also the forward path of the Miss America organization and the changes they're deciding to take later on. The assessment should be used to analyze the response stakeholders in the Miss America organization has when the program makes changes in the future. The ultimate scope will be for this assessment to primarily focus on the perceived change within the Miss America organization and what that looks like. And this might include future changes having to do with the competition, future changes having to do with the leadership, or future changes having to do with the scholarship dollars. Really any changes that are coming in the future at all, because there was such a response to that change when the swimsuit competition was eliminated. It forced the organization into a spot where they have to anticipate what future changes they might make and how those future changes might be responded to by stakeholders. But of course, we're going to get into all of that later. The reputational opportunity, once again, something else that we will discuss later, but I just wanted to give a quick taste of it right away, is the improved societal image of the Miss America organization if they stand to make these changes correctly and listen to the risk assessment. I'm actually going to go back to the introduction just for a couple moments because I think there is a little bit more I wanted to say there. I'm prompted to study these elements because of the declining trust of the Miss America organization and what that has to do with both the stakeholders of the organization and the society at large. As I mentioned, after the swimsuit competition was eliminated, it was revealed that the organization did not anticipate the communication response beforehand. And it was also revealed that the organization made the change without board approval. And unfortunately, it led to a lot of chaos and a lot of misunderstandings between the organization, the stakeholders, and also the public. I really think the issue of declining trust is important to recognize because, like I said, it caused major distrust within the organization. And according to Griffin, this introduced a climate of low trust, putting the value of good reputation and good relationship with the public, the stakeholders, and the organization at risk. So that is important to add in there before we move on. All right, moving on to context. First, we should look at the analysis of the debate. This issue should be very high up on the agenda within the Miss America organization because the organization nearly collapsed under eliminating the swimsuit competition. It was such a big change and it was such a shock to the stakeholders of the organization that they nearly collapsed. So if that is what the organization stands to lose, if they do not handle changes appropriately, it should obviously be very high up on the agenda. The organization's ability to weather change has been a hot topic for several years now. The public is interested, but the stakeholders within the Miss America organization are more interested. And those stakeholders, we'll discuss them in more detail later, but those stakeholders are people who are competing, volunteers, scholarship donors, leadership, the list goes on. The public is likely to view this very differently than the Miss America stakeholders. The public might just view the Miss America organization or the Miss America pageant as a once a year annual event to watch, but the Miss America organization stakeholders have much more physical or even mental or financial involvement within the organization. And that's important to recognize as well when we are analyzing this risk. How will the debate of the risk develop going forward? Well, the public opinion of the Miss America organization will develop depending on how society continues to view the modern day perception of women. Because as we know, this is something that looked very different when the organization began in 1921. It looked different in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You get the point. And then it's now the year 2022. And obviously, the modern day perception of women in beauty and female empowerment is very different. And the Miss America organization has been questioned for its relevancy. And so the public opinion of the Miss America organization really will develop depending on how society continues to develop these beliefs. And the stakeholder interest, I just gave a little bit of a background on this, but as I mentioned, the people who are most interested are likely to be volunteers, contestants, parents, scholarship donors. And some of the competitors to the competition are other pageant systems. There are many, but primarily it's Miss USA and Miss Volunteer America. Those are the two most direct competitors to the Miss America competition. All right, moving on. We're going to discuss some more context here. There are some milestones within the organization that are important to discuss. For example, the short-term milestones. This will help stakeholders and the public understand and become with current and future changes made by the Miss America organization. And then the long-term milestones are a solid plan for adopting change in the future will ease potential feelings that the Miss America organization is doing so without proper insight. Because as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the Miss America organization did make the decision to eliminate the swimsuit competition without board approval. And so they didn't really have the proper insight, and they also didn't measure how stakeholders within the organization would perceive the change. And so that's something they will obviously have to change going forward, and doing so would be a long-term milestone. And the flashpoint is if the Miss America organization continues to make too many changes too quickly, they will lose impact and they will lose annual viewership. And that is a big deal. Annual viewership is what keeps the organization on TV every year. And that in and of itself is a major marketing factor for them. For the Flashpoint, this is what has caused quite a lot of controversy, just taking on too many changes at once. Too many changes at once kept the Miss America organization in the news way too frequently. And it really just got them in a lot of trouble with doing things too fast and doing things without necessarily stakeholder or public perception in mind. And I think it would help the organization to understand similar changes with similar issues that similar organizations have made over the last several years. For example, the Miss Teen USA competition used to have a swimsuit competition, just like the Miss America organization did. But a few years before Miss America got rid of their swimsuit competition, Miss Teen USA got rid of theirs and they changed it to fitness. Miss America did not give any new portion of the competition to swimsuit. They just got rid of it, and now there's kind of an empty space. But Miss Teen USA decided to replace it with fitness. And that kind of eased the blow of losing a portion of competition. And it definitely helped them understand that you can do a lot more than just get rid of a competition. And there was a lot more thought that went into that, especially because the Miss Teen USA organization got board approval and everything like that. Miss USA, the sister program to Miss Teen USA, they did not get rid of their swimsuit competition. They still have the swimsuit competition, but they included more speaking elements. So they added another area of onstage question. They added more conversation, and they also put a lot more emphasis on women's empowerment, women's rights, and so on and so forth. So therefore, they were adding more to the competition rather than taking away, and that went over very well for them. And they didn't get rid of the swimsuit competition even. The Miss America organization itself has even gone through other phases of change other than just getting rid of swimsuit. For example, a couple of years ago, they increased the age eligibility. It was controversial for a moment, but because it was a small change and other changes weren't being made with it at the same time, it went over a lot better than new leadership plus getting rid of the swimsuit competition all at once. All of these context assessments lead me to believe that this is an extremely externally driven issue. And I say this because most of the changes being made are thanks to external pressure. Per the Griffin textbook, external issues are targeted toward organizations doing something not in society's interest, by way of moral outrage or public indignation. When it comes to the swimsuit change specifically, many feminists and much of the public were morally outraged that it still existed, which is what caused the change to happen. I think that's what ultimately caused the Miss America organization to cave and say, let's just get rid of the swimsuit competition. But in reality, there were a lot more people, even in the public and within the organization, who wanted to keep the swimsuit competition around. Since it's been a few years, I think the Miss America organization doesn't want to go back because I think they're smart enough to understand that would create even more controversy. But these are things that they could have known had they done a risk assessment in advance. And so addressing these issues and comparing the similar circumstances that competitions have dealt with over the years can hopefully lead them in a more positive direction. So despite the fact that the Miss America organization has made a lot of abrupt changes over the last several years, there are some positives that have come from it. For example, there are some reputational opportunities that can come from these changes, some good things that can come from these changes. And this is so important to address because a lot of addressing risks, especially reputational risks, is negative, but these are some of the positive elements if the changes are handled appropriately. And some of them include the willingness to adapt to modern day standards of women and female empowerment, reaching more young women, staying relevant, showcasing what the modern woman looks like, being more inclusive, being more diverse, and ultimately broadening the target market and the target audience so that more women feel that they can be included within the organization. These are definitely some of the positive elements of making the change. And in order to do this, the Miss America organization has to change at the right pace, at the right time. So if they decide to make another big change, like eliminating the swimsuit competition was, they have to make it in a moment to where it's appropriate and it will hopefully be accepted. And they have to let that change be standalone, because if they include it with too many other things at once, it will be very easy for the stakeholders of the Miss America organization, who traditionally love the fanfare, traditionally love the tradition, to be overwhelmed and discouraged by the changes that are being made at once. So it has to be very strategic with the timing and how else everything else is happening at the same time. This further proves the need for the assessment that we are completing right now. Now it's time to address the reputational risk register. I created 3 examples of this, so you can see 1, 2, 3, but we'll start with number 1. And I wanted to just sample a high, medium, and low ranking for each in a situation that I believe would qualify for each. So we'll start with our high ranking situation and the impacted stakeholders. If the Miss America organization continues to make abrupt changes to its competition, it could shock stakeholders into not understanding the mission or value of the competition in modern times. This could cause significant donors to withdraw their donation. If that continues over and over and over, the Miss America organization will lose its status as the top provider of women's scholarship, which would be a major blow to their brand. So the impacted stakeholders here, there are 2. The first is that it would impact donors, as they're the individuals making the scholarship fund possible and keeping the organization status of the largest provider of women's scholarships alive. And the second stakeholder that would be impacted are the contestants themselves, because they stand the largest gain by competing for the scholarship funds within the organization. Our sample of the medium reputational risk register is that the Miss America organization is a nonprofit program run solely by volunteers. The continuation of abrupt changes will make it more difficult to maintain volunteers, especially because numbers have gone down in recent years. The number of volunteers have become less and less and less. So obviously, volunteers are the top impacted stakeholder here. Volunteers will be impacted because they are the primary people running the organization, and contestants will be impacted because the fewer volunteers there are, the less room there is for contestants. Because volunteers run from the national level to the state level to the local level, and a majority of these contestants are at the local and the state level. Because if you think about it, at the end of the day, there is only one Miss America, but there are hundreds of thousands of state and local title holders, and that's where most of the volunteers come in. So if you lose them, you're going to definitely lose a lot of value in the organization. For the third reputational risk, this is what I would consider a low risk. If the Miss America organization continues to make abrupt changes, it will have to switch TV networks at a frequent and inconsistent rate. This has already happened within the span of the last 10 years. The competition has gone from being on ABC to being on NBC, and now it's not even on cable TV. It is on Peacock, the streaming platform associated with NBC. So the constantly changing portions of competition make it an extremely difficult network to keep up with, and it makes it very confusing for traditional fans of the organization who might not be directly involved but still want to watch every year. It might make it really hard for them to find. And so while that could turn into a medium or a high risk eventually, I think it's a low risk at the moment, because you have to realize that you can't get that consistency going unless you take care of the reputational risk register, number 1, and number 2, which are high and medium risk. So the impacted stakeholders here, once again, are donors. They're impacted because they are paying for scholarships. The leadership is impacted because they are paying for the network, and volunteers and contestants are impacted because they are not getting the proper recognition by having that moment on TV. It might seem like a really small thing, but They are stakeholders in the organization, and those are the little moments that mean a lot to them. Moving on to discuss scenario planning. I think it is very valuable to address the short, medium, and long-term scenario planning or goals, the scenario planning situations. And so I think obviously we should start by discussing the short term. The short term is when the Miss America organization decides to announce future changes. The short-term risks will include the damage of another quick change made to the organization. So many changes have been made so recently that another change would lower the credibility of the Miss America organization before it even has time to recover in time for the next change. This will show in the immediate loss of contestants and volunteers, which is extremely unfortunate. And that's what we will see in the short term. The medium term is that there will be more societal confusion as to what the Miss America organization is. People will be confused. Is it a beauty contest? Is it a scholarship program? Is it a job interview? Who knows? Who knows? And that would be a medium term risk because people, to an extent, are already questioning that. So if we don't get a hold on these changes now, people will go into the future. Society will go into the future questioning whether the Miss America organization can commit to a brand and if they can be consistent. In a society that is already hesitant about the Miss America organization, this will lead to more public opposition toward the program, which once again already exists. This will result in the loss of donors. Long-term, the long-term risks revolve around the likelihood that the organization will not survive any more sudden changes. Change can be good for the Miss America organization, but it has to be changed in an appropriate way for both the public and the stakeholders. And these do ultimately relate back to the opportunities we discussed earlier if the change is done correctly. A lot of what we were talking about in those opportunities. In fact, I'm going to go all the way back to the opportunity slide just for a moment. Reputation opportunity. There are 7 great opportunities listed right here. And a lot of them depend on good scenario planning in order to make it happen. If we want the organization to be more relevant in society, if we want them to be more inclusive, more diverse, and to showcase what the modern woman looks like, then we need to focus on the scenario planning. That is extremely important, the short, medium, and long term. Now moving on to point number 6, the reputation strategy assessment. I took a very straightforward and simplistic view to this because I think that is the best way for an extremely iconic organization like Miss America to look at it. Change within the Miss America organization can be mitigated by making small changes one step at a time. If you think about the stakeholders in the Miss America organization, and I already mentioned this a little bit, but I want to reiterate it. The stakeholders within the Miss America organization love tradition. They love what they know, and they don't really like change. But that doesn't mean that change has to be completely outlawed. You just have to do it one small piece at a time. Otherwise, it's going to be overwhelming to the Miss America organization, which is just something a lot of people cherish. We have learned that too much change at once overwhelms the stakeholders and the public, and that multiple choices at once will not be worth it. You have to give the organization a chance to make multiple choices, but initiate only one change at a time. The Miss America organization will lose opportunities, donors, and contestants if the changes become too overwhelming for them. And that leads to the biggest question of all, is whether or not it is worth taking the risk to even make more change to the organization. Should you just leave it as it is? Or should you take more opportunity to change it? And I think the answer depends on what the change at hand is. And so that is up to the Miss America organization to decide. But as a public relations professional, the advice I can give is the manner of which the risk should be taken, the manner of which the change can be brought about. And so change can be perceived well by those involved with the Miss America organization. In fact, even though the choice to eliminate the swimsuit competition was made in 2018, people are finally starting to come around to it. And so it's proof that even if people might not like a change at once, they do come around, but we want people to be on board as soon as possible. But in order to make that happen, all of the change cannot be happening at once. So you can't choose to make a big decision and let it be a shock to the organization. You have to include the stakeholder voice. You have to include the public voice, the contestants, the volunteers. So many stakeholders deserve to be part of this decision because at the end of the day, the Miss America organization is meant to be a program that uplifts and empowers young women. And that is a decision that needs to have their best interests in mind. Last but not least, I wrote the overall reputational risk assessment. The assessment concludes that the reputational risk of introducing more change to the Miss America organization is overall medium. Introducing change by slowly initiating it will push the risk to a low. There are, however, clear opportunities to manage this risk successfully in the short and long term. The debate of appropriate change within the Miss America organization will improve if it is brought into a space where it can reach more young women, stay relevant, be more diverse, and broaden the target market. If brought towards these positive opportunities, negative sentiment around the Miss America organization will soften. What remains clear is that initiating too much change at once is a poor decision for the Miss America organization. Change is possible, it just cannot be too much at one time for them. The Miss America organization has done so many amazing things for young women across the country, and hopefully they have the opportunity to receive a reputational risk assessment just like this, so that the stakeholders and the people within the organization can understand the value of what it's like to be involved and the value of having faith in the organization going forward. But in order to achieve that, you have to have trust and you have to have good planning efforts. And I think this is something the Miss America organization is capable of. It's just something they have to think about even more going forward. Thank you so much.